Today, I'm chatting with Francesca Rawlinson from Frankie's Therapy. Fran is an integrative therapist, coach, and mental health advocate who supports individuals through attachment wounds, trauma, relationship challenges, and life transitions. Life transitions? Wow, sound like I've been drinking. Her approach is grounded, compassionate, and rooted in helping people reconnect with themselves and building meaningful change. How are you today, Frankie?
Yeah, really good actually. I had a really quite relaxed morning. So yeah, all good.
Good. So we've got it all squared away on the name. So Frankie, all the way through? Fran, Francesca?
Yeah, I need to be honest.
Do you ever get called Franny?
No, that's the only one.
Yeah. Did you shut that down?
Like it's the Franny. Yeah, that's the only one.
It's too close to other words, isn't it? It's not ideal. It's not a good start, is it?
Like, oh, no.
No. Shut that down immediately. No, thank you. So I'll start where I always start, and that is, how did you become Frankie's Therapy?
So I trained to be a drama psychotherapist and ER therapist. So I'd done multiple trainings. And basically in my work, I was seeing a lot of people coming to me with relationship issues, but it was all relating to attachment. So everything kept relating to attachment and why we were choosing the partners that we were choosing. But in it, I at the time was in a toxic relationship myself. So I think in it, I've always done journaling and things like that. But I was looking at journals that I'd done, and a lot of my writing basically came from being in these relationships myself. And I think as a therapist, it's very interesting, even dating or being in these relationships and seeing how much you are drawn to these red flags because they feel so familiar. But your body is drawn, but the logical side of your head is going, why are you still in these relationships? What is drawing you? Why are you still lay there when you know this is so unhealthy? So a lot of the writings is from things that I've been through. Not all of them, thankfully. But yeah, a lot of them are. It's kind of been that, and that's where it took off, really.
Yeah, because it become incredibly successful, especially on Instagram. And I think that's mainly because your content is so human and relatable. It speaks straight to the real problems. There's very little faffle, Instagram-y stuff. It's all real talk. And I really admire that about your page. It's a real goldmine when it comes to this sort of thing as well.
Oh, thank you. And some of it is just journal thoughts, really, of when I've been in them relationships, really, yeah.
So it was your own lived experiences that drew you to be interested in this work, and then I suppose you must have had a feeling at some point of like, why doesn't everybody know this type of feeling?
I'd read a lot of books at that point, unbelievable books, but they were very theory heavy. So I was saying to friends of mine who were either dating or in these relationships, I was like, I know why we're doing what we're doing. I was like, I really do know why. At the time, I was still in them situations, but I was like, I do know why. So I was kind of trying to do it as well, where it was not as much of the theory side of these words that, where you're like, oh, I don't even understand the first word, never mind the second word. So I thought I wanted to make it a lot more relatable, something where you're like, oh yeah, I get this as well, kind of thing, really. And I think you also have a lot of therapists who there's a lot of books out there that tell you the theory, but potentially don't have as much lived experience. I'm not saying that they don't, but they don't show it in the writing, if you know what I mean. So I think sometimes that can feel a little bit, you're reading the theory side rather than somebody who has lived through it.
You mentioned attachment theory and the attachment concept and methodology. Is there any way you could explain that in your beautiful way, the way that you do around these things, so that if anybody's listening right now that they don't understand what that means, attachment theory, and how it relates to relationships and how we relate and attach to other people, could you do that?
Yeah. So it all begins on the attachment cycle, really. So basically, as a baby, well, through life really, but as a baby, we have needs to be met. So for instance, the baby, they might need the bottle, they might need milk, they might need the nappy changing, and they need touch as well. They then cry to get the needs met, and then they are then reassured. And then this goes around and around and around. But what happens? We've got 4 different attachment styles. So we've got secure attached, which is what we're all trying to
The Holy Grail.
the Holy Grail. I'm there.
Oh, yeah.
Then we've got anxious attached, we've got avoidant attached, and then we've got disorganized. Now, what happens if we look at this attachment cycle is that if somebody is anxious attached, it's when they've been wanting these needs met, but it's not came. So they do more of the cry to get the need. So it's like cry more, and then the need is then met. Now, when we look at avoidant attached, it's looking at actually they've cried, and the need still isn't getting met. So then they shut down, which leads to avoidant attachment. So I think when we're looking at these different attachment styles, and in the media or in social media, I think there's a lot around ghosting and things like that. But actually, ghosting is your whole nervous system is shutting down. I'm not enabling that behaviour, but if somebody has done that, it is a nervous system response there. So that's usually linked to the avoidant attachment as well, really.
It's so interesting that you say that, because whenever I work with anybody and an issue or challenge comes into the conversation and it's around relationships, what I often do as an exercise is I try my best, first of all, to validate their feelings and to validate how they feel. Whether how they feel is right or wrong, I think it's important to respect the fact that that's how they feel at this time. So we validate the emotion, we validate the feeling, we validate the way they feel about everything that's going on. But then I set them the challenge of trying to understand what it must have been like to have been the other person, to have been in those exact situations with those exact stresses, those exact insecurities, those exact concerns, and to really step out of, but they shouldn't have done that. We know that part. They shouldn't have behaved that way. They shouldn't have cheated. They shouldn't have done whatever they did. But let's try and understand why that happened, because especially if you're in a long-term marriage and things are not working out, and that happens when you have children and your life shifts and changes. The people you were when you were 20s, not the people you are when you're in your 40s or 50s or whatever. And it's trying to understand that person again. It's trying to understand that, okay, all those shifts have taken place and I'm still treating you like I did when you were 20 and you're not, you're 40 or whatever else. Yeah. So I think that's a really wonderful thing that you say there. And also you caveated it by saying you're not validating it, you're not condoning it, you're just saying that that is part of the reason, is that they are having their own emotions and this is their way of dealing with it. And I think we're safe to say that we've all can sit here and say that we have dealt with things emotionally wrong. Everybody has done that. Everyone's sat there and gone, oh, I really shouldn't have said that. I shouldn't have done that. But we did.
Yeah, 100%. Yeah. And it's just like that part of you that goes, I think even when we look at attachment, we can use parts work for it and go, actually, that was just the avoidant part of me majorly coming up there. And that's okay. We've just got to work on that part. Like, that's okay. We're all messy. We're all learning. I think people think that you have it together when you do this work. And you're like, oh, they touched my personal life.
Yeah, there's a real Wizard of Oz syndrome going on with us, isn't there? So you mentioned like parts work there. Can you briefly explain what that is so that people can follow what we mean?
There's a lot now on parts work, but I absolutely love it. Like, I think it was an absolute game changer for me to use for myself and to use in therapy as well. I think the simplest way to describe it is using Inside Out.
The cartoon.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And how all of these different emotions are there, all of these different parts of us are there. But you can use character work almost of seeing like, okay, like the inner child is a part of you. There's a manager part of you. We can use it with attachment. So actually, we've all got avoidant parts of us. We've all got anxious parts of us. And actually, at times, we're still living from a survival response. We're still living from this anxious part where it doesn't actually need to be in this survival state anymore. It's looking at actually that can actually be lowered a little bit. We're actually safe now, but often we're living from our child self instead of living from our adult self. So we're living in survival mode, really, and that's where these parts are heightened. But we go, actually, this is just a part of us. It's not who we are.
Love that.
Yeah, I think it's so big. It changed my way with me quite a lot as well, going like, oh, actually, I did send that text message really impulsively. Oh, what did I say? Going, oh, that was the anxious part of me in that moment. That's okay. I'm human. It's messy, but maybe I can bring up the other part a little bit more now, the safer part.
I work on that as my career changes and I get these opportunities that I'll be open and say do scare me at times. So sometimes I get there and I start to feel that imposter syndrome feeling looming. I find myself in those situations where someone will send me a text message and it'll be a compliment. It'll be like, oh my gosh, you did really well at that talk on the weekend, very rare. And I'll see the top line and it'll be very congratulating. And I'll be like, I'll become avoidant straight away. It's like, I can't look at it and I can't do that. And it's like, wow, where's this coming from? And then I find that there's these situations where I feel this urgency to respond to a message, even though I know it needs some consideration, but there's this urgency that comes up. And what I've done now for myself is I've practiced recognizing that urgency, and it doesn't go away. It's still there. I still really want to send a text message and probably send some sort of messy, regrettable message or whatever else, but I just observe it. And I think ultimately that's what I hear in what you're saying, is that by recognizing those parts of yourself that act out potentially from an emotional state, you get the opportunity to put choice back into the situation. It doesn't feel like that because you still want to do the thing, but what matters ultimately is that you practice not doing the thing. And again, as we know, that sometimes doesn't work. There'll be certain characters in your life that just always seem to get you to, they just know what button to push, you know, and they push it really well.
Yeah. 100%. And it's that taking control back and taking the choice back to go, I have choice over this decision. And actually, if I respond to it 5 hours later, I'm potentially going to make a better choice there. Or sometimes there's the thing of, I think when you look at avoidant attachment, it can be that that person does need half an hour to go and I need this half an hour space really. But if that anxious person knows that they're going to come back in the half an hour, that's very different than leaving somebody for half an hour. So you're navigating this anxious avoidant can work as a relationship, but you're navigating, okay, my go-to is space, your go-to is need, and in that time I might need that space, but you will know when I'm coming back so that your need is met and my need is met.
Yeah, that's it. And I love how you started with that, with needs, because I had a client once who felt that urgency to respond. So what we did in the end is we went into their notes of their phone and we wrote a generic message that you can send that basically says, hi, can you give me a couple of minutes with this, or can I get back to you in an hour or so? I'm just driving, I'm just doing something. Just something to create some space that can be easily sort of structured and has got some guidelines and boundaries. Because if you try to write a message like that, I've had it before where it's been like really passive aggressive and I'm like, they're there and I'm like, no, that's still saying screw you a little bit. That's still saying that. So maybe stick to the message that we agreed to when you wasn't in heightened emotion. Let's do that.
Yes. Yeah, 100%. And it is that where the irrational side of your brain in that moment is massively taken over there. Show really, and even with that, I always think you can see it like Inside Out, where it's like, you know, this character that comes up and you're like, whoa, like this is just like my impulsive side or my impulsive part is like wanting to ride this out. So it's working on, okay, how do we then bring some rationale to that really?
It's like you've been emotionally activated. And if you think of that emotion, like it's literally filled you and you've just got to let the emotion level come down a bit so you can, or at least come down past your head so your brain can think, you know? And then you can make a better choice perhaps, and you can get that choice back. Whereas in that moment, it just doesn't feel like it. And I suppose that's why I'm sort of hovering around this area, is because there's a real difference between feeling something and doing something. And I think a lot of the time people want to take away those feelings. But if I'm honest, it's part of the challenge I have around the concept of healing emotionally. It's that I think in my experience from myself and from what I've seen in others, I think if you have a set of behaviors that you learned as a kid, there may well always be this part of you that wants to do that thing. And I don't know if that necessarily goes away. I mean, I'll tell you on my deathbed perhaps, but I don't know if that necessarily goes away. But what's so important is what you do, because if those emotions come up and then you do something and you create a situation that then echoes the past, you're then reaffirming that you've not grown out of that or you've not moved away from that. And that's a really difficult thing. So I think it's really important to understand that those emotions, I mean, you tell me what you think, but do you think those emotions go away? Yeah.
Like, and it's just bringing me to unhealthy relationships and healthy relationships, and thinking if we have been wired for unhealthy love and unhealthy relationships, that does not mean that we get into these healthy relationships and we don't think about the unhealthy ones. That's just so unrealistic. But if we've been wired for this love, to see love in this way, we then might miss them highs. We might miss that, how drawn to that person, how magnetic that person was. But we know that actually with healthy love and with a more boring love, not boring person, that doesn't come. Them highs, you don't get them dopamine hits. But the healing doesn't mean that we don't miss, trust me. We don't miss the dopamine hits. We do still miss that, but we know that that's not the right choice for our life, and that's not the right love that we want as well. But if we're so conditioned for that, there's still going to be that part of us that misses that, and that's okay as well, really.
That's so interesting, because the way you described that, it almost sounds like addiction, in the sense of that someone can drink alcohol to an excessive level and they get that hangover the next day, and the hangover is hell, and they know it's coming, but yet they do it anyway. And it's like, if you think about, you get into that relationship and you do that thing that you always do, even though you know tomorrow you're going to have the worst emotional hangover ever, or you're going to feel a certain way. It's so interesting the way you describe it. I'm not sure I've heard it quite that way before. That's fascinating.
And it's so the chemicals are the same with these. We're going back for this dopamine hit to this really, unhealthy person, and we get withdrawals when we withdraw from them. So it's looking at, so obviously then the next weekend you're gonna go back. It's the same, like it's a hit, isn't it, really? So you're wanting that dopamine hit and you've seen love in that way, and then the withdrawal is like in it, and then you go back and the pattern repeats and repeats and repeats. So it's looking at that really in it.
That's incredible, because it's also like, you think about the guilt and shame that a lot of people get when they say they have a hangover. They start thinking about what they said and what they did, and they start going, oh, and they start to feel really bad. And it's a very similar situation when it comes to love being the alcohol. And you kind of doing whatever but it's not the alcohol you crave, it's the way it makes you feel, right? So that's the relationship. It's not the person, it's the way they make you feel. It's the buttons they push of familiarity that cause that comfort, that make you think, oh, this feels like home. It's that kind of feeling. Yeah.
100%. Yeah. And it's also, you think, maybe I can fix them. Maybe.
Yes, the potential in somebody. Yeah.
Potential is just so massive. Usually it's a situation of reminding of a caregiver. It's quite a common dynamic to see that, and then going, we've got this wound that we want to fix through that. So then we try to fix this wound really through this person. But usually that is a recipe of a disaster, really, because they're not changing and we just keep trying to fix through that.
Yeah, so we blame them for not living up to the potential that we saw that they're not even aware of. That's you can't win that game, can you?
No, you cannot win that game.
Blimey. So I suppose the big
in my head it was different.
Yeah, you're not performing the way I want you to. Could you please stop it?
Yeah.
I suppose the big question, the one that everyone will ask, is if you have these attachments that you develop through your early life that become your comfortable, familiar behavioral patterns, can you change them?
And that's why I love attachment doesn't work because we can rewire our nervous system, which I just think that is genuinely unbelievable that we're able to do that. And that is one of the biggest things of rewiring it, is a choice of a partner. If you've got somebody who's very safe around you and you're feeling very safe, that will rewire how you see love to be. So that's where people don't see the rewiring is intrusive people as well. It's probably one of the biggest ones, is the safety of the person around you.
Yeah. So what if you have like say there's a couple having trouble and then one of them realizes that their attachment is different to the other person and they want to both try and change, but they're trying to work out their own attachment. What happens there in couples? Like, do they have to work together? Do they have to work separately? How would they go about that?
So what I see in my work is, I don't do couples.
No.
So I do see most people that come to me, they're wanting to do the work and the other person isn't.
Yeah.
Now, if I have people come to me who their partner is willing to do the work as well, I recommend couples therapy, because obviously you've got there two people doing the work, and that is going to be the best result for that. So I think obviously the best thing would be a couple in the therapy. I think what's very common is one person's coming and the other person is not willing. So that's where things are going to get really difficult. But I think in a relationship, when we look at attachment, there is no reason why this avoidant and anxious attached people can't work. Like, that can definitely work if they're both willing to do the work. And what you find in them relationships is actually when they start doing the work, the anxious person can swing more to the avoidant, and the avoidant can swing to more of the anxious as part of the healing journey, as part of the getting to the secure place. So I think that is where both people are going, okay, maybe it wasn't the dishes. Maybe when you didn't do the dishes, I felt really unseen because I'd asked you again and again and again to do the dishes. But actually that relates to my 5-year-old self when somebody didn't do things as well, when I'd asked again and I'd been taken advantage of for all of them years. And actually what that makes me feel like is this. And that person often could be quite shocked that that's the dishes represent this. Or now I think we get a lot of people who are on phones in relationships. I think that's really common, but the other person feels unseen. And in it, that conversation of, oh, okay, when I was younger, I did feel unseen at these times. And when you're on your phone, that makes me feel really unseen. So this is my 5-year-old self, but it needs that level of communication to know, okay, what's behind you being on the phone. So it's not just, I'm telling you to get off your phone.
Yeah.
Do you know what I mean?
Yeah.
It needs that level of communication in there, really.
Do you think when people start to pick up each other's attachments, that's a reflection of empathy, perhaps? Maybe an attempt to understand? It speaks to that willingness to want to make the relationship better by trying to understand. Even though you might not agree with that person or you might think it's weird, you're putting effort into trying to understand it. Do you think that might be behind it?
100%. It is having like that empathy towards them, to also want to make the relationship to work. And to want to make that change, really, isn't it? And I think you see a lot of relationships that kind of like put a lot of things under the rug as if they're not happening. And then you're going to have a mountain by the time you hit 50. There's that much under the rug and we're just pretending it's not going on, rather than going, actually, relationships in themselves are really, really messy. For a true connection, you're going to have to both really, really see each other. And in that is mess within itself. So it's looking at that and going, okay, what do we need to bring from underneath the rug as well, really?
And that's probably why it's important to have somebody there to manage that conversation so that people don't become reactive and perhaps say things they don't necessarily mean out of feeling hurt or unseen or disrespected in some way. Would that be an accurate summary as well?
And to see it properly as well.
Yeah.
So to see like, okay, what's happening to that inner child part, what's happening there, it can be a little bit harder to navigate that relationship, can't it, when you've not got that third person there really to see the outside thing of what's going on, and I suppose looking at where is it all actually coming from as well.
Yeah, because what you spoke to earlier was that history of the relationship leads to that assumption. So when somebody says something, you're like, oh, I know exactly what you're going to say now. You're going to say this and you're going to do that. And that person probably wasn't going to say that, or was. In either way, they're going to get annoyed because they've been seen in a way they didn't want to, or they've been misrepresented. Either way is going to cause them to get annoyed. So you can see how that trap is sort of laid.
Yeah, 100%. Yeah.
Yeah, not on purpose, I expect. But I mean, so just to clarify, if two people were trying to repair a relationship for whatever's going on in the relationship, there has to be a willingness from both sides. Yeah,
There's
I'd agree
got
with that.
to be. Yeah. If one person isn't doing the work, that becomes a really, really hard relationship to then navigate. And I do think you do see that quite a lot when one person is willing to do so much work and they're going to like this level and the other person isn't willing to do the work. And then the only way for it really to work is for this person to come down to this level. Really, that is your only way to navigate that moving forward. I think that's really common dynamic to have as well.
Especially if you're talking about a long-term relationship, and it doesn't matter who you are, you're a couple that fall in love and you have children, that relationship is different now. You spoke a lot about resentment and respect, and that's a key thing to speak to as well from your side. That sort of collection of resentments over time. I like the way you use the dishwasher, because it isn't just a dishwasher. It's the not taking the bin out, or it's the not hoovering, or it's the always cooking, or it's the always doing this or always doing that, whatever's going on, or not picking up your towel, or whatever it is. All of these tiny little things that can be just like, really? That's what you're worried about that? It's like, no, but it's that and the 20,000 other things. And you collect those resentments, and then one day you've had a few drinks and before you know it, you're fighting about something. And I like the way you said earlier, it's not about the dishwasher, it's about all of this stuff. And it's that collection of resentment that is a relationship killer. Would you agree with that?
Yeah, 100%. And because when you go on your phone, it makes me feel unseen. It makes me feel neglected. It's rare to even get to the point of what that makes you feel like inside yourself. So if you're then dealing with thinking, okay, why am I getting so affected by this? Then it can be a thing of it's just a trigger and you're just yelling to somebody to get off the phone and you don't even know why you're acting in that way. What's going on underneath you to be so triggered by this, really.
Do you know what really hit me then was I could see a conversation where one person says to the other, can you get off your phone because it makes me feel unseen, it makes me feel neglected. And then the other person, for embarrassment, saying, oh, that's ridiculous, like I'm neglecting you. I'm not neglecting you, you're so dramatic, you're so this, you're so that. And then now we're not dealing with the issue at all, you're dealing with how you believe each other are talking to each other about something that hasn't even happened. This is how quickly it unravels because of those emotional wounds. And going right back to the beginning, that's why it's so important to understand these attachment theories. So you've got a model or an overlay to see what's really going on, to give you the choice to go, okay, I feel quite triggered when you say neglect because neglect means something different to me, but I hear what you're saying and let's talk about it. That's quite difficult to do.
Yeah, really difficult to do as well. And I think it comes back to that thing of relationships being messy as well, and humans being messy. As a human, we're all messy. We've all got loads underneath our own rug. So put that with another person's rug with loads under. It's all messy. You are dealing with imperfect messiness and going like, okay, how can we navigate this to make it work for us as well, really, and to really see what's going on beneath this surface as well.
Yeah, I mean, I love the way that's like an injection of hope there. And correct me if I'm wrong, when you get into hard times in your relationship, it is possible to salvage that relationship by understanding each other's attachment styles and understanding what they are, why they do what they do, what it means, what it doesn't mean, and vice versa. And then working towards finding solutions instead of blowing up the problem. Because what I like about what you're saying there is, I suppose people focus on the way it was said, not what was said. Going back to that whole, I feel neglected neglected part. And it's like, okay, so instead of hearing that, you take that as an accusation because, say, neglected means something different to you. So now you're arguing about something that's really not relevant to the conversation, is not going to bring you towards any conclusions. But if you understand that that's their emotional vocabulary and that actually means this, and you understand why, because of the attachment theory, you're then able to, like you say, and I love the word you use, navigate. It's not about fix. Nothing's broken as such. It's more about recognizing the stormy sea. When you've got the sail and you're trying to navigate the best way you can, you're trying to find out which direction you want to go in. You're trying to work out how you're going to best optimize the winds. You're going to look out for the tides. You're going to do all that sort of stuff. And that's what attachment theory is. It's letting you know what the weather and the conditions are like, in a sense.
And also that thing of working on yourself in it as well is so massive. I think there's a thing now there of almost going, I've just sent the impulsive text message because I have anxious attachment. And actually that then enables the person to do that rather than going, actually, I'm going to try and work on being less impulsive because of the anxious attachment. And that is then you working on becoming more secure rather than going, oh, I'm just an anxious attached person. This is why I act in these ways. And I'm then going to almost enable myself to act in them ways rather than going like, actually, my aim here is to work on towards becoming more secure. And that's where the work has to be done on ourselves. And then when you've got both people doing that work, that's when you're going to really see the massive changes there, really.
Yeah, because you can imagine if somebody's acting out their attachments, if you've got somebody who is avoidant and then someone who's anxious, you can imagine one of the anxious person chasing the avoidant person around the house when actually they both probably need to go separate ways, allow their emotions to simmer down so they can have a conversation that is more productive. So you can see how it all plays out and have empathy for all of it. And it's nice to know that that can be navigated with the right help and the right information. So I think you'll give a lot of people hope on that front. Well, got some questions here. Haven't even got anywhere near them because I find all of that so interesting and I love the way you explain it. I think people are going to love the way you explain it. You've got a really good way of explaining attachment theory. I think you bring it into that actionable information like, okay, that's lovely, all of that theory, all them big words. How do I do it? How do I get into it? So I suppose that's a good question to ask just before I move on to the ones that I intended to ask you. And that is, if somebody is interested in attachment theory, if somebody is having trouble in their relationship, if somebody feels that understanding attachment theory from them, maybe their relationship that they're in at the moment won't survive, but it's still something worth doing for the future relationships, where would they start?
Yeah, it's interesting, really. I do think education is the biggest turning point in it all, if I'm honest. I do think it is the education side, which when we start learning about why we are doing what we are doing, I just think that is massive. The psychoeducation, which I don't think people have that really. So I do think that is your beginning to it. And then I suppose it would be the therapy as well is a huge place to start, really. Yeah.
Can you recommend like any books or courses or anything like that?
So I would say I'm doing a membership at this minute, which is all on attachment. So
there you go. That was good, isn't it?
So basically, I've done it in 5 minutes where you just learn about attachment. So it's really simplified. There's attachment quizzes in there and things like that. There is a book called The Attached, which is also amazing. So you got 2 things there.
Oh, perfect. So many people feel lost or disconnected from who they really are. From your perspective, why are so many of us struggling with our sense of identity today? And what does it truly take for someone to reconnect with their authentic self?
So I think when we look at it, I think it all comes from our condition and how we've been conditioned to be. So I think when we look at that, we're from a generation really of good girl conditioning, where girls were conditioned to be compliant. They were conditioned to be very like malleable almost. So in that, sometimes it can be to get love or to feel connected. I need to be the good girl, which is then suppressing so many needs and so many of our own needs. But actually, we're often meeting the other people's needs in being this good girl or this very like masked version of ourselves. And I think for boys, it is usually the strong man. So it's men don't cry. We were all brought up with this conditioning. Over time, we're going to have lost ourselves along the way because we've been so conditioned in these ways. But when we look at the true self, I think it's being like, actually, you're right there. You are there. And sometimes it's about removing the conditions rather than becoming. I think that's so massive in it of going. Sometimes I think people can be like, oh, where is my true self? Almost. And you're like, you're there. Like, you're sat right there. We've just got to work on removing these conditions rather than being, oh, I've got to become this new person almost. So I think that is massive when we look at working towards the true self, really.
That's interesting because I was having a conversation with my son and he looks at the world in a very sort of black and white way. And we were talking about gender roles is something he was learning about through school. And he was trying to get his head around it and he was exploring it and I was just letting him explore it. And then he said this, he said, so is it men's job to be useful? And I thought, interesting. How interesting of a question is that? Is it a man's job to be useful? And then I said to explain what you mean. And he's like, you know, when we're asked to like pull out chairs and hold open doors or to go and help bring the shopping in and all these different things, and he had all these examples and I was like, this is really interesting conversation that he's looking at the world like that and then he's observing what I found it fascinating, and it's just about watching his friends who are girls and how they behave, and how he even pointed out that there was a performative, that's not his words though, that was my interpretation of his words, there's a performative element to the way that the girls were, and I thought this is fascinating, seeing it from this young age. And I wonder if you'll still see these things going on in 10 years time when more conditioning's been layered on top. You have the conditioning of your parents, and then you've got the conditioning of the partners that you've had or partner that you've had, and then you've got all your friendship groups and what they like and dislike and all of those different things. And you can see how it's that attachment isn't, well, it's kind of always happening, that conditioning, right? That conditioning all the time.
Yeah, and you know, you see it in, I think, schools. You see it all the time in school. It's very much, I've heard stories where still to this day, people are getting awards for sitting the stillest.
Wow.
You know, you're like,
I would not win that.
Definitely not. And it's that as well of how much suppression is actually going on there within this school system, which it's almost like, I think the education system is very much in the dinosaur era, really, isn't it? When we're looking at that, or being told to be quiet is good. That's a suppression of a voice. Yeah. So it's looking at all of this, which is happening not just in the home environment, but in the school environment. And a school can be this secure base as well for a child. So it's very much looking at what's happening within there and how the education system is also conditioning as well, really.
Yeah, it's interesting. I remember reflecting on a time when you go from being a kid to an adult, say 17 through to 18. And for your whole life, you've had to ask permission for everything. Can I go out? Can I have some food? Can I make a phone call? Can I go to the toilet at school? All of these different things. Then all of a sudden you go into a workplace and you're doing those behaviors. And then you're looked on like, why are you asking me? That's quite scary when all of a sudden you're like, okay, so none of these rules apply. Well, what are the rules? What are the boundaries? What should I do? I'm terrified. You could do anything around it. Anything could happen. It's quite a scary notion. I remember thinking that late teens, just like not understanding the rules. And I think whether I like the rules or not, I perhaps am somebody that gets comfort from knowing what the rules are and knowing the boundaries and all of those things. I think that's probably who I am. Don't know what that would make me. I won't let you psychoanalyze me.
We do need that as well, don't we? I think it's that thing of, they say with children, if you have a field and you just let them run around the field like wild, we actually do need a fence. We need the fences to, you know, they're our boundaries, really. You know, we need these fences to say, actually, it's really unsafe if you run all around this field. There's roads around. So actually, we do need boundaries. We do need fences. So it's looking at them boundaries in a different way, really, I suppose, isn't it?
I've always taken a stance, especially when I'm doing like talks and stuff. I always explain boundaries as an association to values. So our core values are the things we value the most, and the purpose of a boundary is to protect that value. For example, an emotion as such, like anger, is a response to a boundary being crossed. If somebody jumped over my garden fence and just decided they were going to hang out in my garden, I'd be pretty pissed off about that. And I think it's a good thing because it gives me the energy and the clarity to put the boundary back in place, get out my garden, all of those things. And I think that's what is missing. And it, again, again, you talking about conditioning, if boundaries aren't shown to you as a kid, then it's something you have to learn later in life, right? Or you don't know your own values, perhaps, or you observe bad values, if you want to put it that way, or unhelpful values from a parent or something like that. So you can see how people can get confused and they can lay into their conditioning. And actually, it makes me think that that's probably a lot of the time people respond to that by just going with the flow. That's where the people pleasing comes in, right? It's like, well, they seem smart, I'll just do what they think's best instead.
I think if you're constantly in that people pleasing mode, you're constantly meeting their needs and suppressing your own needs. And I think you see that all the time because it's never been thought of, okay, what need am I suppressing there as well, really? You know, what need am I not meeting of mine to just meet their need, really?
Yeah, because that behavior that you practice, you become quite good at. It's that word practice. If you practice something, you become good at it. So if you practice people pleasing, you become really good at it. If you practice ignoring your own needs for somebody else, you become very good at it, which then means that when I ask you what your needs are, you're like, well, I don't know. You might even think, well, why does it matter? Because that's not my game. I don't play that game.
Yeah, 100%. Yeah. And I think even when you're breaking away from that people pleasing, then people won't be pleased. Do you know what I mean? So it's realising that element of things as well, noticing that what's coming up when the people are no longer pleased and you're like, oh, I need this connection again. And you're like, oh, do I? Like, so it's noticing all of that that's coming up in it, really.
Do you know what my favourite is? I've had it a few times with clients where they're working on installing boundaries and then the person that they're working on with starts calling them a narcissist. And I said, I don't know if that's narcissism or more that they don't like that you've got boundaries now. That misdiagnosis of narcissism, we probably shouldn't get into it, but it's something that I see a lot now as a lot of people are narcissists. And it's interesting. I think it was Jimmy Carr that said, narcissism, I have the disease, but you have the symptoms. Interesting way of diagnosing it. So we're running out of time now, unfortunately. I can't believe that I had all these questions that I didn't get to ask you, but there is one here that I will ask because I think this one's important because we're more connected now than ever, but also more lonely. What's really driving the loneliness, isolation and disconnection people are feeling today? And what does genuine human connection actually require from us?
I think it's such a good question as well because I think you can be in a room full of people and feel so lonely and so isolated because you don't feel seen. If I look at my relationships in the past, some of the loneliest I've ever felt is in a relationship. You know, it's not been when I've been on my own. So it's looking at in that, it's because of this lack of vulnerability, this lack of being seen, which then it leads to this massive loneliness and isolation within. So I think when we look at that question, I think there's a lot of almost like inauthenticity out there where actually, you know, if you bring your messy self and the other person brings their messy self, and then you really see each other in that mess and in that vulnerability, that is when the trueness of connection is really formed. So I think it's that which is the driver behind loneliness now, is not being willing to be human, be messy, be raw, and build this vulnerability of being truly seen as well.
Do you think it goes back to what you said before as well about being willing to break your conditioning, or at the very least break the conditioning that no longer benefits you as an adult?
Yeah, 100%. Definitely. It's thinking, okay, if I'm not doing this people pleasing, if I'm not trying to be this compliant, okay, let's break this down. Who am I with this person when I'm not doing all of these conditionings as well, really?
Yeah, do they still accept me when I'm not doing this? It's like, goes back to what we were talking about at the festival around conditions of worth. If you've always been showing that you're only good when you do this thing and you find a partner that also likes that thing and then you stop doing it because it's exhausting and you don't want to do it anymore, what happens then? That's an unpredictable fear. That can be so easy for you to go, well, I have to do it. I have to carry on being this way. Otherwise I'll lose everything. And it's like, well, here's the question. Do you want that thing that you're going to lose? Because I think that a lot of life, and I think you saw me talking about it it at the festival again, is I always say that I'm a truth seeker. I'm looking for what's true. And I think that a lot of people don't want the truth to be what it is, or they avoid the truth because the truth comes with a lot of actions that are uncomfortable and they don't want to take them. And I think that for me, that might be an ingredient towards loneliness, is you're not living your truth. You don't want to be with that partner anymore. You don't want to have that job anymore. You don't want to have that career. You're done with that friendship group or whatever it is that you want to do. And you don't feel like you can because, and I get it, some conversations with people, you just can't imagine having them. They're just too hard. And you know that person's going to do that thing and you can't be bothered with it. Oh, it's just easier to stay the same, right?
Yeah, and I think that's it as well. I absolutely love that as well, the truth seeker. It's so massive there, really, isn't it? Of going like, oh, okay, what is my truth and what is my value in this as well? And having that thing, if you are offered this amazing opportunity, but it really contradicts your values, what happens if you take then? Who does that leave you at the end of the day? And it's looking at that all the time and coming back to that inner truth, really.
I realised something, and if there was ever a life hack, it's this for me anyway, is that all I have is my values, and my values give me comfort. They're my integrity. They are the person I want to be in the future, the person I strive to be, the person that I'll be proud to be. And for me, there is no thing that someone can ask me to do that if it pulls me away from my values, I will lose so much more than that opportunity. If I say no to that opportunity, yes, I'll lose the opportunity. I'll lose whatever it gave me. But for me, if I took the opportunity, what I would lose is my sleep, my integrity, my peace, my pride, my self-respect, and I'm just not willing to do it. And it doesn't mean I make them decisions easily. I don't. I sit there going, oh my gosh, should I really say no to this person? They're a big podcaster, or they're a big publisher, or they're a big this. And then I sit back and I go, well, what are you going to do, Johnny? Are you going to do the thing that you don't want to do? That's not who you are. I won't make it on that road. I won't. I know I won't. And don't get me wrong, I second guess myself and I do all those things. But at the end of the day, when it comes down to it, when I say no to something, I usually know straight away how I feel about it. I'm like, it was the right decision. Does it sting? Do I wish I could have done the thing? Of course I do. And I see that same thing in you as well. I see that in you too, that integrity.
I do think what's really interesting is when we're saying it, I'm kind of thinking out loud, really, but you know where your body is telling you, no. Like, this is not the right thing. So, and yet your head is like, oh, logically, maybe you should, but your body
and you've got other people telling you should, you know.
Yeah. And it's going back to that, okay, who am I if I lose myself along the way? Is it worth that loss? It's just so not as well, really. So it's massive, really.
So my takeaways today around attachment theory, and you described in the beginning, like you do kind of move through all of them to get to the one that you sort of settle at. Is that an accurate description, or have I got that wrong?
Not necessarily. It's more that you might have the anxious attachment, you might have the avoidant attachment, and then we've got a disorganized, which is basically where it swings between anxious and avoidant. But that usually comes from extreme trauma, usually, is the disorganized, where you are swinging between the anxious and the avoidant. So it could be that when you're anxious attached, as healing goes along, you could swing to avoidant a little bit first before you get to your security. It wouldn't mean that you would switch to go to disorganized, if that makes sense.
That almost sounds like a defense mechanism. It's like, okay, I'm in a state where I'm vulnerable almost. So now I'm going to go to avoidant as a way of defending myself whilst I'm being vulnerable. It's
a survival response, isn't it? You know, you're in a survival place where actually a lot of the time as our adult self, we're no longer in a survival place. So we're actually safe. As a baby, as a child, we had to survive. So we used strategies as a way to keep the connection. Because actually, parents and caregivers, they gave us our shelter, they gave us food, they gave us all of our basic needs. So we actually needed that connection to survive. Absolutely. So we're going to do absolutely anything, really, to survive. But then as an adult, we're often going from this place of trying to survive in a relationship where actually often we're safe, you know, often we're in this controlled environment, but we're still living from our survival self or our survival like mechanisms, really.
Just one last question. Is there anything you'd like to pass along that could help people with their self-development?
I'd say my number one inner child technique, which I just love. Say if you think of a situation that you have been in, so it could be like relationship wise, it could be like workplace, and think of yourself in that environment and you go, okay, what would I tell myself? What would I tell myself to do differently? And then think of a younger version of you, or if that's too hard, think of a younger child around you, or it could be a son, daughter, niece, nephew, and think, what would I tell them to do in the same situation? And often when we look at inner child healing, it is so different to what you are doing yourself. So it's coming back to that question again and again of, okay, what would I tell that younger person to do in this environment?
Just practicing being kind to yourself, isn't it?
Yes,
I think people are so
massive.
horrible to themselves, aren't they? So many of us are just so unkind to ourselves. We do things to ourselves that we never do to anybody else, ever. It's incredible.
Yeah. Yeah, 100%. Yeah.
So just before you go, tell people where they can find you and direct them towards anything that you want them to know about.
Yeah, I'd say Frankie's Therapy on Instagram, and then I have got the membership coming out on Sunday.
This episode will be out on the 10th of December, so that'll be out by then, won't it?
Yes. Yeah, it'll be out by then, yeah.
If you find me the links and I'll stick all that in the show notes and people can find it nice and easy, because I've got a feeling there's going to be a lot of people that want to be part of that membership.
Thank you, loads, Johnny.
Frankie, thank you so much for today. It's been so lovely catching up with you. We've been sort of following each other on social for a long time now, liking each other's posts and all that sort of stuff. We met each other in person at the Excel Festival, had such a fun weekend, and I've been really looking forward to catching up and talking to you today. So thank you for your time.
Oh, it's been so lovely, and I absolutely loved all your workshops, Johnny, as well. I think that's why I had imposter syndrome as well, because I beat you.
No.
Oh my gosh, it's so good. How am I going to follow?
Now I feel bad. You certainly don't need to feel that way.
Because I was like, oh wow, like everything was just amazing with them. So then I was like, oh no, I've got to follow this now.
Well, I don't know what to say. I'm sorry. And thank you, I suppose. But I'm really grateful for your time today. You've shared some great wisdom here. Like I said, you've got a wonderful way of explaining things. So thank you so much for your time. And anybody that wants to go and follow Frankie, she's given you all the details. It'll all be in the show notes. But thank you again. And I will see everybody next week for another episode of the Johnny Lawrence Podcast.